Well, Francis played in a premiership in his first year. You played in one in your second year. And it must have been quite extraordinary to have Nichols as the captain and Barassi as the coach.
Oh, just wonderful. I can remember going back to the Carlton Social Club at the end of that game, and Carlton hadn't won a premiership for 21 years. And in fact, when Barassi had come to Carlton, they were at their lowest ebb ever. They were at 10th position on the ladder. They'd never been lower than that. Of course, they have since then. And I can just remember as a kid being back in the Carlton Social Club and just the great excitement that it gave the supporters.
And I'll tell you what, Rob, I've played in games for the Bulldogs where we've been beaten, and I've played shocking, but still put my hand out to take the pay packet. Now, I'm led to believe there's a... always put the hand out to the pay packet, sorry. I'm led to believe, there was one game there where you knocked back your money. You didn't take it. That's not right, is it? Is that a true story?
Yeah, I did do that. I was pretty young.
I'm very confused.
That's right. That's right. A bit stupid, I think. Mind you, we got paid $25 a game in those days. Yeah. And you just wanted to play, but I did play a particularly poor game, and I just felt that I couldn't take the money.
Now, there's another end of this story, though, isn't it? You didn't take the money, but you said, can you play it? Is this right? You can pay it to my sister?
That's right.
We put it into account, and now it's worth 1.5 million. Is that true?
Well, that's right.
He's transferred it.
My sister took the money, but I think she blew it, Tony.
No, it's 1.5 million. He's made her pay the tax. What about the Blues? Everybody talks about the great small men the Blues had, the mosquito fleet through the 70s and 80s, but gee, you look back to the tall key position players, starting from yourself, Mackay, the Ruckman, Percy Jones, these types of players, and like Percy wasn't a superstar, but he got it done. And then we go to Mike Fitzpatrick. Yeah. There was just as many great key position players in the Carlton side as the mosquito fleet.
Well, you're right, Tony. And look, David Mackay was probably a really tall half-forward flanker. He did play back pocket and so on, but David Mackay was a wonderful player. Dooley held down centre-half back for a decade. Southby full-back for a decade. Mark McClure started his career just before I finished, and Alex, of course, at full forward. So the goal-to-goal line was always quite strong, and always had good ruckmen, because there was Nichols and then Jones and then Mike Fitzpatrick followed. Francis
said before that when Richmond was playing Carlton, Graham Richmond would find some story to tell, why we had to beat the the marauding invader up over the top of Punt Road, and often even Jack Dyer would come down, generally for Collingwood or Carlton games, mainly Collingwould, but occasionally I would call for a Carlton game. Did you have anyone come in specially when you played Richmond down at Carlton? Did they sort of, grab one of those great old players to come in and say, you've got to beat the Tigers?
No, I can't remember anyone, Kevin, but it was very high on the agenda with Barassi and with Nichols, the two coaches through that decade. And they were huge build-ups. You would have a big Thursday night dinner. So training would be short and sharp, and then you'd go and have the Thursday night dinner, which you only did maybe 4 or 5 times a year.
That meant it was a big game.
That meant it was big. And actually, the man who probably did get up and say a few words was the president, George Harris. And we were terrified of George.
So, were you terrified of him, Robert?
Absolutely.
What, is the president or the dentist?
George would, he would sit, as you were getting changed for a game, you'd have your shorts and jumper on, you'd be tying up your boots, and George would come and sit next to you. And without looking at you, he would just say, "Walls, I expect you to play well." And with that, he'd get up and walk away.
Were you regarded, Rob, at centre forward, you regarded as a ball player? You didn't mind giving a bit out yourself when you obviously would have copped a bit playing a centre forward?
Oh, well, I think playing that position, you've sort of got your own opponent and often a ruckman coming at you. And I suppose as the years went by and, John Nichols finished up around about 74, the baton was passed on, and you as a vice captain and then eventually a captain, you were expected to be one of the leaders as far as playing strong football goes. I'm not sure that was in my nature as a 16-year-old, but you know, it comes into your game.
What about the captaincy? You had it in 2 stints, I think, a couple of years apart, but you only had it for 1 year each time. Was that right? 1.5 years or 1 year? So was it something that you wanted, or it wasn't in your system, or others took it away from you when you did want it?
No, Tony, I don't think I was a good captain. I was vice captain to John Nichols for about 4 years when he was captain coach, and I was part of match committee. And for a young fella, that was pretty exciting to go and sit with the likes of a Bert Deacon and Jack Rout and learn about football and how teams are selected and so on. When John Nichols gave it away, I would have assumed that I'd be captain after 4 years as vice captain. It didn't happen. Alex Jezelenko got the captaincy. I was disappointed. Alex was captain for 2 years. I played pretty good football in those 2 years. I then got the captaincy. And basically, I think the footy team was split. There were half who wanted Alex as captain, there were half who wanted me as captain, and I would think...
What year was that, Rob?
It was around about 75 to about 78.
Did you have a bad year before they picked the captain? The fact that you were vice captain for 4 years, and then all of a sudden Jez has been elevated above you to be the captain. Did you have a bad year? Did something happen so that they all of a sudden said, oh, I think Walls is, his form's not as good, he could be on the way down, or something like that?
Well, 72, 73, I had pretty good seasons. 74, I injured my knee and played with a crook knee for most of the year and struggled. Whether that came into it or not, I'll never know. I was never told. But it was probably a 4-year period at Carlton where the players were not united behind the captain, whether it be Alex or myself.
And there was coaching problems too. You went through a period, didn't you, that John was coach and then he left, like mid-season, then they looked for Serge came in as a coach for a period of time, and someone else might have filled in, and then all of a sudden Ian Stewart was coach of Jezza took over at one stage, and Stewart. There was a lot of chopping and changing there.
Yeah, there was. Look, for 10 years it was settled with Barassi for 6 years and Nichols for 4. John Nichols left the coaching position on the eve of the start of a season. It was the Monday night before round 1. Ian Thorogood took over as coach for 2 years, and we made the finals in that first year. I think we missed the second year. Ian Stewart came. Ian Stewart and I blued. That's why I left the club. I was captain, and
but he was only there for a short period of time.
Ian was only there for about 10 games, I would think. I left after 5 or 6, and when Ian gave it away, Serge stepped in for a couple of weeks just as a caretaker coach, and he said never again. Like 2 weeks was enough for Serge, and they offered the job to 2 or 3 different people at that stage. So I've been told.
Yeah. Neil Roberts, I think.
Neil Roberts was one, definitely.
He had a crook ankle from a car accident, and
that's right.
Probably felt he was incapacitated.
And so Alex got the job as captain coach. And he pushed, I'd left, of course, I'd gone to Fitzroy. He pushed them really hard for a couple of years, and they won a premiership.
So you left before Ian Stewart left the club?
Yes, about a month before.
So if you had been there and Ian had left the club, because obviously you didn't get on with Ian, would you have stayed at Carlton under Alex as the coach?
I would have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is there a regret there? Sorry, is there a regret there that you actually left?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm really pleased that I was able to play at another club, because I think it helped me appreciate what footy's about. Because you played at the one club at Richmond, and Tony at Collingwood. I know, Doug, you had a year or two at Fitzroy.
Yeah.
But I think that in your footy schooling, if you like, I went from a really successful club to a club that was on the bottom of the ladder, didn't have any money, and everything was a battle to survive. I played there for 3 years and loved it. And it made me a better coach, because I'd seen footy from different angles. And even though a lot of my teammates, it's wonderful to have played at one club, like, your Dools and so on, but I reckon I can appreciate footy better having been to different clubs.
So, Rob, with the coaching at Fitzroy, you mentioned Fitzroy. Brian Roy, we spoke to last year in Grumpy Old Men, had a 9-hour interview for the coaching job at the Dockers, which he missed, to Chris Conley. Did you get interviewed for the job at Fitzroy, or did...
Yeah, I had 2 interviews. I'd played there for 3 years. During the last year that I played, they actually asked me halfway through that season, would I coach, take over as coach. I said no, because I just felt it was the wrong thing to do.
Who was coaching then, Rob, at that stage?
Bill Stephen.
Bill Stephen, good bloke, terrific bloke, yeah.
And I just felt it was the wrong thing to do. So at the end of that season, There were people like Alan Jeans in for the job, Hayden Bunton Jr. Alan Jeans took the Hawthorn job and had great success. And I can remember Keith Wiegard and Leon Wiegard saying to me that because I was a school teacher, they felt that was a disadvantage. They felt that because I was a school teacher that I may not be able to handle men. I think because I was a school teacher helped me organise and plan, actually. But, yeah, I had a couple of interviews, Doug.
Yep, okay.
And ended up getting the job, and it was just on a one-year basis, and just see how you go, and ended up being 5 years with Fitzroy.
So was the background of Fitzroy when they were struggling and they played finals? Did they play finals in that period? Yes.
Yeah.
3 times, I think, out of the 5
Yeah,
5 years?
we did.
The next coaching appointment, of course, was the Brisbane...
Carlton.
Oh, sorry, Carlton, back to Carlton, then to
David
Brisbane.
Parkin. It was a big swap, wasn't it?
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah, David took over at
86?
Fitzroy. Yeah.
86?
The 5 years I had at Fitzroy were the happiest days of my coaching career.
Is that right, Robert? Fit the happiest time?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was, you know, we're all in it together. You knew everybody who was there was fair income because in the time that you played at Fitzroy, like, you know, it was hard work, wasn't it?
Hard and tough, yep.
So the people who were there because they genuinely wanted to be,
Yeah,
and it was
right.
going to be a slog. Look, lucky to have players like Roos, Pert and Osmond start as 16, 17-year-olds. Matty Rendell came as a young fella, Scotty Clayton. The bloke I enjoyed coaching more than anyone was Gary Sidebottom. And he came to us a broken and beaten man. He played at St Kilda. He had a year or two at Geelong where he was treated like a dog.
And missed the bus even.
He missed the bus.
They didn't even bother picking him up
on the
on their way to a preliminary final.
That's right.
Just left him.
And when I spoke to Gary, in those days you could swap mid-season, you could transfer, and I'd never seen a bloke so low. And he said to us, look, I don't want, if I play in the seconds, if I'm not good enough to get a game, I don't want to be paid a cent. And he said, if I play senior footy, well, I want so much a game and I want to be paid straight after the match. So I think he'd been burned.
It was cash in hand.
And we said, OK. And he played at Fitzroy for 3 or 4 years and was just sensational value. And the smaller players, because we're a pretty small side, Gary Wilson and little Gotchi and the Harris boys, they just loved being around Gary Sidebottom.
Well, then you had the opportunity, of course, of going back to Carlton. Did you really jump at that opportunity to go back to Carlton? I know there was the swap, of course, with Parkin going to Fitzroy. But did you think of another club, or was that the only club available? And was there some point to prove to Carlton people?
I had a chance to go back to Carlton a year before, but I was on a contract with Fitzroy.
So they tried to poach you, maybe.
And Big Jack said, don't worry about your contract.
You're coming.
I just walk out.
Just walk out. And I said, no, I'm going to honour my contract, which I did. And Fitzroy finished out of the finals. And I thought, well, I've probably blown any chance to go to Carlton. But what happened, Carlton had made the finals, lost their final badly, and Ian Collins rang me that night. They're pretty ruthless at Carlton.
That night?
Yeah, that night.
The night of the final.
The night of the final.
The night after they'd been beaten.
So David Parkin's there, having a drink, you know, talking about the loss and maybe the future, and Ian Collins was ringing you to see if you'd coach.
Absolutely. And the same thing happened to me about 3.5 years later.
You knew it was going to happen, didn't you, Rob? You know it was going to happen to you.
I did, Doug.
Well,
And,
I knew it was
and
gonna happen.
my wife said to me when
It's a phone call for you, Rob.
when the offer came to coach Carlton, she just said,
good luck.
she said, you know what's going to happen? She said, Parkin, Nichols, Jezelenko, Thorogood. She said, you're not going to be any different. And of course she was right.
You did win the Premiership though, so you proved it in 1987.
I guess the main reason I went to Carlton was, one, it was my old club, but secondly, as a coach, you like to you like to have things going your way, if you like. You know, when I went to Carlton, straight away Kernahan, Bradley, Motley, Dorotich arrived. When I was at Fitzroy, it was a battle to keep your Mick Conlons and your quality players because we didn't have any money. And so the club would sell them off. So I went back there and, look, I did enjoy coaching the players. There was pressure on you because you're expected to get the team to a grand final. Whether you won the Premiership was probably the, well, we'll see what happens there, but anything less than a grand final appearance was considered a failure, so there's a fair bit of pressure on.
Is this greater satisfaction than how many premierships you won as a player coaching a premiership side?
It's satisfying, Tony, to be a coach, but nothing beats playing, because you're out there and you're actually doing it.
Right.
And you feel as if you've got a bit more control, whereas as a coach you can sort of, as you would know, you can put all your plans in place, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Well, Robert, you had a crack at Fitzroy. They were way down. Then you go back to the Blue Bloods, I suppose, in Carlton. And then you head up to Brisbane. Now, that must have been like revisiting Fitzroy again. You must have thought, now, hang on, I've been here before.
Well, they were on the bottom of the ladder. I'm a great believer in the national comp, and I just thought when the offer came, I thought, well, if you're fair dinkum about your footy, you take it. And look, it takes a bit of guts to get up and leave a comfortable environment like in Melbourne where you live and your kids go to school and you know your neighbours and all that. So we did it. And it was 5 years that we spent up there, and forget the footy for a moment, it was 5 of the best years of our life as a family. To sort of get away.
The environment, Rob,
you have to look after each other. Yeah. There's no support network around you that you have when you're in your own state and so on.
Rob, just to show how hard it is, can you tell the story about what happened when you went into McDonald's prior to a game, one morning of a game? Fantastic story, this.
It happened, the first 10 games that I coached up there, we lost. And at about that time, after the 10th loss, Doug...
Things are getting tough, right?
Well, I tell you how tough they got. We used to play on a Sunday at Carrara, and on the Saturday morning, I'd go down the beach. We were living on the Gold Coast, and my boys would have a swim, and we'd go to McDonald's for breakfast. And this particular Saturday morning, I've walked in, and I had my Brisbane Bears T-shirt, and the kid behind the counter looked at me and he said, oh, you barrack for Brisbane, do you? And I said, yeah, I do.
What's the listen to this?
And he said, are you going to the game tomorrow? I said, yeah, I'll be there. He put his hand under the counter and he gave me 10 free passes to the game. And that is the absolute truth. And I took the tickets.
Jeez.
And sold them.
250
I couldn't give them away, Tony, at that stage.
What a great story.
He gave it to his sister. We must take a break. We'll take a break on Grumpy Old Men. We'll come back with Robert Walls. Welcome back to Grumpy Old Men, and Robert Walls has joined us on the couch, and of course he got the 10 tickets to get half the side into the game at Carrara. That's why they lost all those games. The other 10 couldn't actually quite get through the gate. Robert, Francis Burke is here. He's sitting over there with his lovely wife Kerry, and of course he was on the couch prior to yourself. Coached the Tigers, got the sack. I coached the Tigers, got the sack. You decided you'd have a crack at the Tigers as well. Of course you got the sack. Why did you take on the Tigers after leaving Brisbane?
I hadn't intended to coach. When I left Brisbane, it was because I'd had 5 years and my mother was not well, my wife's mother was not well, my eldest son had been drafted by Carlton, so it was time to come back to Melbourne. And I had a job lined up with the Age to write football, so I was all set to do that. And got back to Melbourne, and all of a sudden John Northey left Richmond, and unexpectedly, because they'd had a good year, played finals, and John had a year of a contract to go, and Brisbane obviously had spoken to him and said, hey, we'd like you up there. So John accepted the Brisbane offer, and Richmond didn't have a coach, so I guess they looked around and thought, well, who's available? I was available, but look, in hindsight, I shouldn't have taken the job on, because I thought I'd run my race pretty much as a coach, but you're asked, and it's good for your ego, and I also looked at that Richmond team that had played in the finals the year before, in '95, and I thought, well, gee, I reckon there's a real chance there.
I remember speaking with Phil Pennell, and he was a great Carlton player, of course, and played with yourself. And I remember when you were appointed as coach, Phil Pennell was nonplussed. I think he runs Wesley College these days, Phil. He was nonplussed because Richmond and Carlton have been such great traditional enemies, and you know, Robert was, you know, the great centre-half forward, that a Carlton person could actually go and coach Richmond. Did you find anything difficult in that?
I found the players to be fantastic. I found the club itself to be nervous, and when you lost or something went wrong, there was a, I'll look after my own patch, and you know, leave you to your own devices. It was a club at that time which was very insecure. The support that I got from people at Richmond some of it was just fantastic. And Francis Burke, for example, rang me, spoke to me and gave me every support that he possibly could. And so did several other Richmond players who I'd played against. Look, there was the odd letter that you got from an old Tiger who couldn't forget the past. But that's life, that's life. Look, overall, blokes like Wayne Campbell, Matthew Knights, Tony Free, Brendan Gale, really enjoyed getting to know them as people. And 7, 8 years down the track, I regard them as friends. So, look, football-wise, it didn't work out, but and also, like, you know, Duncan Callaway and a few of them, when I left, a few of the players wrote to me and just really good letters. I guess the bottom line was they just said, hey, you told us what you thought, and we appreciated that.
What about, a lot of people see you as the person who invented zone defence, Rob. You first one to, put it
Kick-in strategies.
And kick-in strategies. Did you always have something in the background of you wanted to implement that even as a player? You thought about it when you played? A lot of people say it comes from basketball backgrounds. I don't know whether you had a basketball background or not, but were you thinking like that as a player because you played smart and just thinking you could get advantage somewhere in stop plays, kick-ins and zones?
Tony, I reckon at about the age of 24, I thought I would like to coach one day.
Gee, that's yeah.
And at that stage, I'd only played under 2 coaches in Barassi and Nichols, and I got a book out and I wrote down all the things that I'd learnt from them: training drills, looking after teams, team meetings, disciplines, etc. And I continued to add to that book. And I used to go and watch, whilst I was still playing, I would go and watch Tommy Hafey coaching and, you know, their drills and so on. So I guess I just had a real interest in coaching, and going to Fitzroy was good because I played under a couple of coaches there who I learnt some things not to do, and that's just as important as learning the good things to do.
Rob, you commentate now on footy now. Do you enjoy the game now? Obviously it's changed a lot from the days you played, and what's your thoughts of footy?
I love it, Doug. I love to be able to go and watch the players play. I marvel at their fitness, I marvel at their disciplines. I reckon we've probably seen the best team that's ever played in the last 3 years. You know, how good are they? I take a keen interest in the coaches and what they do and what they come up with, and I really appreciate anyone who dares to be different. Jared Neesham, who coached the Dockers, he doesn't coach them anymore. he dared to be different. It takes a bit of guts to be different because, you know, I reckon for 100 years footy was pretty much played the way it was played.
And there's a lot of sides have probably taken a bit of that Neesham style now, haven't they, with, you know, keepings off and keeping possession and things of that nature, and Rodney Eade, of course, with flooding and a few things like that. Rob, it's been fantastic to catch up on Grumpy Old Men. Of course, we'll see you on the couch, of course, during the year.
You've got a better couch than us. You've got leather.
It's been great.
Look after you, mate.
Been one of the greats of AFL football, not only as a player, but as a coach and also as a commentator. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Kevin.
And of course, we'll catch you next week on Grumpy Old Men, and we'll catch up with several more stars from the good old days of AFL football. And Bobby Davis will be back.